Okay, hello everybody. My name is Amber, and this is our monthly education. We are in the month of April, and I am the practice manager and wellness coordinator for Edge Counseling and Wellness. And we are going to have Devin speaking today on executive functioning, which she'll go over here in just a minute. But just a couple of reminders. One, this is not a to be utilized as a therapy session. This is just for educational purposes. We do this monthly just to allow you guys to learn a little bit more without having to come into the four walls of our office space, and just as a supplement to any services you may get through us, or just in general if you're wanting to gain a little more insight into different areas within the mental health field. So today, Devin Atkins is speaking. She'll give a little intro on herself. And we'll take any questions at the end. And but you are more than welcome to put anything in the chat if during the presentation a question comes up and you don't want to forget it. You can be more than happy to put that in the chat, and then I can address that during the presentation and make sure that that gets answered at the end if it doesn't during the presentation itself. So without further ado, Devin, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, so I am Devin. As she mentioned, let me just share my screen real quick. Um, Hopefully you can see everything. So I am a licensed professional counselor at Edge, and I have been there for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in June. I have my master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I got that from Bradley University, and I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from Bradley as well. Prior to coming to Edge, I did an internship in the eating disorder program at OSF. And then I've done a lot of additional training in ADHD and working with ADHD in adults. Um, and I mainly work with adults with the occasional teenager tossed in there. But I tend to prefer to see adults, and I really like the older adult population as well, um, and deal with things like mood disorders, anxiety, grief and loss, ADHD, um, and just adjustment to life changes. So today is going to talk about executive functioning in adults and just kind of understanding the deficits that can show up and then the different sorts of strategies that you can utilize to improve that. So executive function plays a critical role in our daily life. It affects our ability to plan, organize, achieve goals, and while it's like dysfunction with executive functioning is commonly associated with ADHD, it can exist independently and it can be caused by other issues, which I'll touch on in a little bit, but it can significantly impact adult functioning. So today we'll just look at the nature of executive function, its relationship with ADHD, how it can manifest in adults, and then some strategies for improvement. Okay, so executive function refers to a set of brain functions that activate, organize, integrate, and manage other cognitive processes. These mental abilities enable us to account for short and long-term consequences of our actions and to, sorry, I've got all kinds of stuff in my way here, and to make kind of real-time evaluations of your behaviors. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that primarily controls these skills, and it serves as the command center for all these complex cognitive activities. And research has actually indicated that strong executive functions can be more predictive of academic and career success than socioeconomic status or IQ, although both can affect it. Um, so the kinds of things that fall under the umbrella of executive function uh, would be self-awareness. So that's basically your awareness of yourself, your self-directed attention. Um, Inhibition, so that'd be like self-restraint. A lack of inhibition would lead to things like impulsive behaviors and decisions. And then there is working memory. So that can include nonverbal working memory. So that's the ability to hold things in your mind. It's essentially visual imagery, how well you can picture things mentally. And then there's verbal working memory. So that's like your self speech or internal speech that people think of as, basically think of it as your inner monologue. Then there's also emotional regulation. So that's the ability to take the things I've mentioned already, your self-awareness, your inhibition, and working memory, and use those to manipulate your own emotional state. So this means learning to use words, images, and your own self-awareness to process and alter how you feel about things. There's also self-motivation. So that's how well you can motivate yourself to complete a task when there's no immediate external consequence. And then there's planning and problem solving. So experts sometimes like to think of that as self-play. So it's how we play with information in our minds to come up with new ways of doing something. So it's like by taking things apart and recombining them in different ways, then we're planning solutions to our problems. So this is kind of getting into the weeds of things, but the core components of executive function. So researchers have developed several frameworks to understand executive functions, and these models can help us to identify the specific processes that make up our executive function system and how they work together to support goal-directed behavior. So different researchers will emphasize different aspects. And then there's a lot of overlap. So there's Russell Barkley's model, and that breaks it down into nonverbal working memory, internalization of speech, which is like the verbal working memory, self-regulation of affect and motivation, and then reconstitution, which is planning. And then there is Thomas Brown's model. So he breaks it down a little further, organizing and activating for tasks, focusing and shifting attention, regulating alertness and effort, managing frustration and emotions, and utilizing working memory, monitoring, and self-regulating. So with the relationship between ADHD and executive function, they can exist independently, but there is a really strong relationship between ADHD and impaired executive function. So someone who exhibits classic ADHD symptoms will typically have difficulty with all or most of the executive functions. But it is important to note that some of those deficits can be present without ADHD. So some of those things, some of those ways it shows up with activation, you'd see difficulty organizing tasks and materials, estimating time, and getting started on something. With focus, you'd see challenges with finding, sustaining, and shifting attention as needed. With effort, you'd see problems regulating alertness, sustaining that motivation, and maintaining processing speed. With action, it'd be problems monitoring and regulating physical activity. With memory, you'd see difficulties with working memory and accessing recall. And then with emotion, you'd see trouble managing frustration and modulating feelings. So to kind of touch on other causes of executive function deficits, and I mean, like, we're all living in this world right now with all of this tech and social media. And I mean, just our culture right now, it's pretty instant gratification and constant distraction. So I think you'll see some effects on executive function just living in this society. But other causes of maybe more severe executive function deficits, you can see that with like major depressive disorder, persistent depressive disorder, bipolar disorders 1 and 2, generalized anxiety disorder, borderline personality disorder, PTSD, autism spectrum disorder, alcohol or substance use, oppositional defiant disorder, chronic pain, stroke, multiple sclerosis, and like different cognitive disorders, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, traumatic brain injuries or concussions, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy. But I mean, like, say, as an example, like, say, with alcohol or substance abuse, so often you might hear the phrase like that alcohol or drinking lowers your inhibitions. So, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty good example of an executive function that's affected. Um, it, your kind of impulse control, like doing things without necessarily being able to think of the consequences. And then with something like major depressive disorder, you often we'll see a lot of issues with motivation. So that ability to actually uh, maintain that forward movement. Okay, so executive dysfunction manifestations in adults. Um, it can be pretty complex, the challenges that can impact that daily functioning. And it presents differently for each person. Um, so with an executive function disorder, a person will experience trouble analyzing, planning, organizing, scheduling, completing tasks. Um, could be all of the above, or a little bit of one and a lot of another. Uh, these difficulties often extend beyond just simple organizational challenges, and then they can profoundly impact that person's quality of life, affecting their performance uh, at work, in school, their personal relationships, financial stability, and mental health. Um, so, like, you'll see time management problems. So, consistently underestimating how long tasks will take, which can lead to chronic lateness and missed deadlines. And we would call this sort of experience time blindness. It's like this difficulty feeling the passage of time and really understanding how long something takes. It can make it difficult to plan for future events. Persistent forgetfulness, so missing important meetings, overlooking anniversaries, failing to pay bills on time. Those are all common issues that can strain relationships and lead to financial problems. Then there's task prioritization difficulties. So struggling to identify which tasks are the most important, attending to low priority items while critical deadlines approach. I heard recently a what would you call it? Like a term, procrastivity. So it's combining procrastination with productivity. So that task prioritization, it's like I've got this big thing looming that's really important, but a person might engage in all these sort of lower priority tasks that maybe feel easier, but it feels productive because you're still getting something done, um, but still not getting that big important thing done. And then there's emotional regulation issues. So that inability to manage stress effectively. And this often results in sudden mood swings or irritability, especially under pressure. And so, like, specifically at home, some symptoms that you might see with executive dysfunction would be like you have something you want to ask your friend, but she's on the phone and you have to wait a few minutes before asking. And then by the time she's finished, you've completely forgotten what you wanted to ask. Or when you're talking with a friend, you find it difficult to follow the conversation, forgetting what your friend said just moments before. Or when you're completing a task with several steps, like getting the trash, taking it outside, and then putting a new bag in the trash can, you'll usually forget the last step. Or when you read something, you usually end up going back to reread the prior section because you can't remember it. Constantly misplacing your cell phone. You feel like you waste time every day looking for your phone or other misplaced items like keys or glasses. Um, or you have difficulty finding a work-life balance. When you try to take on personal activities, it's hard to figure out how much time to spend on what. Um, and then some symptoms that you might see at work would be in the morning, you rush around to get ready for work, but you still end up being late often. Or you plan to complete some work at home, you pack up the items you need at the end of your workday, and then when you sit down to do the work, you realize you forgot to bring home several critical items. Or you are often accused of not listening because you don't follow through on tasks you're asked to do. Or you have a hard time remembering your coworkers' names, even if you've met them multiple times. Um, or you have a hard time managing large projects. Even when you break them down into steps, you find you miss pieces or end up spending too much time on tasks that don't have much importance. And you might often see too, even when you have a deadline, it's hard to just sit down and get started on your assignments. Or maybe coworkers would describe you as easily frustrated. Those are all symptoms that you could see with executive dysfunction. So this can all have a pretty big impact on your daily life. Uh, so the effects of these executive dysfunctions can extend beyond simple organizational challenges, like I mentioned before, and it can affect the quality of life. They can have a ripple effect across all kinds of domains of functioning, leading to a cycle of frustration and lower confidence. So, professional performance, all those challenges with time management, organization, task completion can lead to underperformance at work, missed opportunities for advancement, and then potentially even job loss in severe cases. And then with personal relationships, forgetfulness of those important dates like anniversaries, birthdays, um, the emotional dysregulation, so mood swings and irritability and all of that. And then the difficulty transitioning between work and home life. It can put a strain on relationships with partners, with family members, with friends. And then with financial stability, those problems with planning, organizing, and time management can result in the late bill payments or poor financial planning, impulsive purchasing decisions, and then mental health. Like all of this ongoing struggle with executive function can lead to increased stress, anxiety, diminished self-esteem, and all of that's can just create a cycle that then further impairs that executive functioning and then leads to further stress and anxiety. So there are a number of lifestyle and behavioral approaches that we can talk about to kind of improve those executive functions. I can't obviously hit everything. I probably don't even know everything, but we can definitely go through a number of things that can be a good start. Um, so these different strategies can help create external structures that compensate for some of that executive function weakness, and can also at the same time help to strengthen those skills through regular practice. And when you're implementing these strategies, they might seem simple, but they do require a commitment, and you will often benefit from accountability, like regular check-ins with a good friend, a coach, a therapist, a family member. So, first thing being is establishing some structured routines. So, create some consistent daily routines that will help you to categorize your tasks and make time management a little more feasible. Um, Also, talking about using calendars and planners to kind of get that visual of what you have going on. But also just with routines, like you see it with like sleep hygiene, or sleep routines. Um, Oftentimes it's recommended that you do a set sort of routine of what you do at night before bed. And the idea is that the more you do it, like then when you start to do those things, they start to trigger physiologically, like, oh, I'm sleepy, it's time for bed. So I think that can be the same with these routines that we might develop throughout our day for tasks and things. Like if you do it consistently, like it's going to trigger different sorts of responses in your body that's like, oh yeah, it's time for that now. Um, and then breaking down tasks, so dividing larger projects into smaller ones to make them more manageable. A lot of times those big projects can just feel overwhelming, but if you can break it down into smaller things, smaller bits, it can be less overwhelming. And then as you accomplish each thing, you'll feel a sense of accomplishment that can further boost that motivation to keep going. Uh, and then practicing mindfulness. So, regular mindfulness and meditation practices can strengthen cognitive flexibility and self control, um, creating greater awareness and improving your emotion regulation. And we'll talk a little bit more about mindfulness here shortly. And then exercising regularly. So, physical exercise increases blood flow, enhances cognitive functions and executive skills. Uh, so, even just activities like jogging, cycling, or a brisk walk, they can promote neuron growth. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So, to kind of touch on the routines and planners and scheduling and whatnot, um, there are schedules and then there are to-do lists. And you want to make sure that you use the right tool for the right job. So with schedules, these are for time-specific tasks. So like tasks that need to be done at a specific time, like appointments, meetings, etc. Um, To-do lists are for more non-time specific type things. These types of tasks might have a deadline, but they don't need to be done at a specific time, uh, like taking the trash out before trash pickup day, or a work project, or paying a bill. Um, but a good tip, I feel like, is to put to-dos on your schedule. So have you ever noticed, how to-do items can sometimes get pushed further and further down the line until you've either hit or missed the deadline? So it can be helpful for tasks that have some sort of time constraint. Then, if you have to bump the task, then you need to actually move it somewhere else on your schedule. Like this will make your time more concrete so you can really see how your time is laid out as your schedule fills up. Because, like, you might bump it, but if you have everything kind of laid out in front of you and you can see where your time is going to be spent, you might see that I actually had no time for this, but I bumped it and now it's just going to get bumped further and further. So, actually, kind of getting an idea for how long a task takes um, can really help. Uh, I had heard someone say once, I think it was in something to do with ADHD, but a person who struggled with really getting their dishes done. Um, it would just feel like, oh, it's going to take so much time. It's such a hassle. Like, I don't have time for that. And one day, just decided, like, I'm just going to time it. I'm going to time it to see how long it actually takes me to do the dishes. And they came to find out it took them 7 minutes. And so it's really helpful to kind of have an idea of how long a task actually takes. And then it became much less overwhelming, and kind of this person took the mindset of like, well, I can do anything for 7 minutes. So it was much easier to feel motivated to go do the dishes because, like, it's just 7 minutes. It'll be fine. So even taking that approach with things that feel like really big things, like I can do it for 7 minutes. Like, what is your amount of time that you can tackle a thing, like, for just 7 minutes or whatever time you come up with? But so to kind of touch back on mindfulness, so there are a couple I felt like were pretty accessible techniques that I could share today. So one of those is the STOP technique. So STOP is an acronym that can help you practice mindfulness during your day. And it's pretty simple because it's also within the acronym. So the S is stop or pause for a moment. And then the T is take a breath, a deep breath. And then O is observe mindfully in the moment. So notice your body sensations or what you're doing, notice your surroundings. And then P is proceed with awareness or with relaxation. So on that proceed step, this is your chance to change your actions if you find yourself being distracted or avoiding a task. It can be difficult to make those choices, but the more you practice and use mindfulness with other treatments that we talk about, the easier it becomes. And you can do that at any time of the day, and no one will necessarily even notice that you're doing it. So it's like under the radar uh, mindfulness. But then there's also practicing deep breathing. Um, so we call that also diaphragmatic breathing because you're using your diaphragm. When we breathe, we normally practice thoracic breathing. So this is breathing with the upper part of the chest. This is also where we breathe when we hyperventilate. So when you're breathing thoracically, you're not using your full lung capacity. So instead, we want to try breathing diaphragmatically. If you ever watch like a baby breathing, you would notice that basically it seems like their whole body is contracting and expanding. Um, like they're doing it right. Like we learn over time to kind of breathe incorrectly or ineffectively. Um, so when you breathe with your diaphragm, your stomach puffs out when you inhale. So you breathe in and then up through your lungs, and then you exhale. So when you practice breathing diaphragmatically, you're using your full lung capacity. And a way to kind of make sure you're doing that is when you're breathing, you put one hand on your chest and one on your stomach, and you make sure that the hand that moves when you inhale is the one on your stomach. So you would inhale through your nose and then exhale, often through your mouth. But so not only are you getting full lung capacity, you're also kicking in your parasympathetic or relaxation response. And you might also be lowering your blood pressure and your heart rate. So those are a couple of tools that you could then use in your day-to-day and can really help with emotion regulation and kind of regaining focus. So with exercise and sleep, uh, exercise has been shown to improve blood flow and oxygen to the brain, particularly to the prefrontal cortex, which is that hub for executive function. It also boosts neurotransmitter levels like dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine, which enhances mood and attention and cognitive control. And then exercise also reduces stress, so it lowers your cortisol levels, which reduces impulsivity and emotional reactivity. And then it has short-term and long-term effects on executive function. So even in a single session of moderate exercise, like walking or going for a bike ride, can temporarily improve attention and working memory for a few hours after. So if you have some big task that you're trying to get motivated to work on, it can be good to do 15, 30 minutes of exercise, like a nice walk or a jog or riding a bike, right before you want to do that, and then you'll have a few hours that you will likely have improved attention and focus. Then consistent physical activity, especially aerobic and coordination heavy exercise. So we're talking like dance and martial arts. It's been shown that that's been linked to long-term improvements in executive function. And then wanted to mention sleep because it has a big impact on executive function too. With sleep, the during the sleep, the brain consolidates memories and it integrates new information, and that supports planning and problem solving and goal-directed behavior, all those wonderful executive functions. And sleep restores the prefrontal cortex, and good sleep can help regulate emotional responses and supports attention span and working memory. So quality sleep equals stronger executive function. Whereas poor sleep equals reduced focus, self-control, memory, and decision-making. When you are sleep deprived, the prefrontal cortex becomes less active. It makes it hard to focus, control impulses, make decisions. A lack of sleep can lead to increased emotional reactivity, which reduces your ability to inhibit inappropriate responses or manage stress. And sleep-deprived people often show slower reaction times, more errors, and difficulty holding or manipulating information in their mind. And actually, one of our other providers, one of our other counselors, Kaylee Jean, her education last month was sleep hygiene. So if that's something that you're interested in improving on, you can go check that out. It's available on our YouTube channel, and I think there might be links to it on the Facebook page as well. Um, so training versus creating systems to support executive functions. So it's been shown that you can build up executive functions or train them, and that can be helpful. It's been shown that executive functions are malleable into adult life. But while training can be helpful, obviously it's going to also be dependent on the cause of the executive dysfunction. So that helpfulness can be limited. So, for example, you can't necessarily train executive functions like memory and expect long term improvements with someone who is dealing with Alzheimer's or dementia. Um, Also, it may be important to focus on treating the cause as opposed to the symptom sometimes, like, say, with depression or something, or alcohol use. I mean, many of us know how to use a planner or create a to-do list, but struggle to put these skills into action. Like, we can know how to do the things, it's the actual doing them. But we can put, we can create systems and put those into place to support our existing executive functions, and reduce the strain on those. So, some ideas for that are externalizing, delegating, and automating. So externalize those to-dos, those tasks. So we're talking the planners, whiteboards, sticky notes, anything to kind of get it outside of your mind and out in front of you. And then put those things places where you'll actually see them and look at them, to kind of keep it in your awareness. Set up auto payments for bills. Use AirTags on those items that get misplaced often. Use password managers. I mean, with or without executive function issues anymore, like, there's passwords for everything. I don't think there's any way that anyone can remember all of the passwords. So password managers are good for anybody. Um, and placing clocks everywhere. I mentioned time blindness before. Um, this, helps you to be aware of the passage of time. So if, you think about what gets in the way of r- me being on time for work in the morning, let's say, like, thinking about, like, oh, well, let's say you take a shower and you know, you have no idea how much time it actually takes you to do that. You might lose track of time. So putting a clock somewhere in a place where you're often, like, doing something that you lose track of time in. Uh, so like having a clock in the bathroom if you're someone who, like, I don't know how long I was in the shower. Um, Another thing is matching tasks to energy. So our energy levels and ability to focus fluctuate throughout the day, and it's different between different people. Like, some people are more productive in the daytime and some are more in the evening. So, kind of learning what works best for you when you have the most energy, and then planning your most cognitively demanding tasks for the times of day when you have more energy and more ability to focus. I mean, for me personally, I have more energy in the mornings and early afternoon. So I would want to plan my most cognitively challenging things during that time. You might also want to consider what types of things might pull on your energy throughout the day. Uh, For instance, like, for me, the evenings, I have kids. So when I get home, there's going to be a lot more demands of my energy from kind of some outside sources, some kiddos. So it's going to be maybe even more difficult for me to remain focused on some task that might require a lot more focus. So, keeping those kinds of factors in mind when you are planning those tasks for those times of day. And then consider your environment. So, what environments do you perform best in? And consider what is distracting to you. So, thinking about the signal to noise ratio, if you think about radio stations, you want to tune into a frequency that doesn't have a whole lot of static. That static is going to make it really difficult to really hear what's being said, to focus on any of that. So, what causes the static for you, or what causes noise? So, like phones for most people, right? So, why waste energy trying to resist your phone when you could put it on silent or even put it in a different room when you're trying to focus on something? So, think about what kinds of environments have what types of distractions and how you can kind of manage that, um, and choosing the ones that you just perform better in. Okay, so a big issue with executive function is that kind of motivation, the internal being able to motivate yourself. So something that really helps is using consequences more effectively. The further out something is in the future, the less we feel it now. So in order to feel future natural consequences, we need to bring the future more into the present by making the consequences more immediate. Um, so why do so often when a task is no fun, we push it off to the last possible moment. So what can you do to bring those consequences up sooner? Like an example could be like you can't get on the phone until you complete that work assignment. And you also want to make consequences more frequent. So it can be good to maybe schedule more frequent check-ins with your supervisor uh, for a particular project that you're working on, to kind of add some accountability. Like, hey, someone's going to ask me about this. So, yeah, the deadline is a ways away, but they're going to want to see some kind of progress since I'm going to be checking in. Like, I don't want to waste their time. And then also making those consequences more external. So, like telling your friend you'll buy them dinner if you're late for a meetup, like if lateness is an issue for you. So, make them immediate, make them frequent, and sometimes you might have to create some artificial circumstances, like they're not going to be necessarily be natural. Um, so the no phone until homework is completed or chores are done or a work project is completed. The more you can bring the future to the present, the more likely you'll be motivated to action. So a kind of a mindfulness thing that you could maybe incorporate too with that is pausing to visualize how you will feel in the future if you do or do not act now on whatever it is that you're maybe putting off. So picture it as vividly as possible and compare and contrast the acting and the not acting now. How will the future you feel about the present you? For example, like for me, taking out the trash, let's say, like it's the night before trash day. I can take the trash out, and that feels like I have other things I want to do. I could just put that off to tomorrow because trash person doesn't come until tomorrow morning. Like I could just get up and I could take it out then. No big deal. Just put it off. But if I picture how future me is going to feel about that decision I'm making right now, probably going to be really annoyed at me because 9 times out of 10, like I'll wake up in the morning and be like, the last thing I would want to think about is like getting up to go haul the trash out to the side of the road. And then more often than not, like I won't even think about it because of the chaos of the morning and all of the other things I have going on that I won't even realize until I hear the trash truck driving away. So, can you visualize how that future you is going to feel about that decision? And if you're going to be really mad at your present you, like, then maybe you need to act now. All right, so some tips and tricks for, creating those systems at home that kind of help you. Having a dumping station near your front door. So have a tray or a basket near your front door where you drop your keys, your wallet, your phone when you get home from work. This will increase your chances of being able to find those items when you go to work the next morning. And this uses something called the point of performance. So, like with your keys, you might lose those frequently, or maybe you realize at the grocery store checkout line that you've forgotten your wallet. Like losing items can be common when you have executive function challenges. So, one way to keep track of your items is to keep them at the point of performance. So, where you are most likely to look for them and use them. For example, your keys and wallet should be in that basket by the front door. When you get home, you put them there right away, and then you know exactly where they'll be when you need to use them. Use notes before you leave the house. Check yourself, make sure you have the trifecta, your phone, your wallet, your keys. You could put up a sign by your front door that says wallet, keys, phone. If you have difficulty remembering to brush and floss your teeth before bed, make a list of your bathroom tasks and stick it to your bathroom mirror. Like put the notes where you will see them. Clear bins for organizing. It almost sounds kind of silly, but when you have executive dysfunction, you have to see things to know that they exist. So when storing your items in containers, get clear ones. That way you can see what's inside of the container instead of guessing. And then it's also helpful for them to have locking handles. So a secure lid means that, sorry, now I have a tickle. Secure lid means that if you accidentally tip it over, nothing spills out. And you can even get clear doors for your refrigerator, which, I mean, I like to hope I'm not the only one, but how often do you find that like all of your vegetables went bad in the refrigerator drawer because you forgot that you even had them? It's like out of sight, out of mind. Um, Getting auto shut off appliances can be really helpful if you are someone who tends to get distracted and leave oh my goodness, and leave your kitchen appliances on when you leave the house. Obviously these can have disastrous consequences. So make sure that, when you're in the market for buying appliances, that they have an auto shut off feature. And then make sure that it's engaged or on. I mean, even stovetops and ovens will have those features. And then there's some digital household assistants or smart homes that can turn off appliances even when you're at work. Use timers. Like we have our phones on us all the time, pretty much. And they have timers, alarms, all of these things at your fingertips, like calendar notifications, things that can help you stay on track with your schedule. So you can set timers for taking medication, when you're supposed to pick up your kids from school, when you have a meeting, when you're supposed to leave the house. So use the things that you have available to you. And then just a couple of interesting things that I've seen that have helped some people. So body doubling. Sounds like, ooh, I could just like create a double of me and get more done. Not exactly, but what this is in reference to is when another person works alongside you, and it kind of creates an accountability anchor for your focus. So having someone present can help you initiate and maintain task engagement. This can work virtually or in person, And you don't even have to have a lot of interaction with the person. I've actually seen on different like ADHD websites, they have like Zoom meetings where it's just people meeting to have accountability to get something done. And then they just will check in, feel like where you at with things. But this can reduce procrastination by giving a little bit of gentle social pressure. And it also leverages our natural tendency to mirror behaviors of others. So this can, I mean, I've seen it myself. Like I am way more motivated to engage in maybe household chores when like my spouse is also working on something. Then there's something called the Pomodoro technique. So this is kind of a structured way of breaking work down into chunks. So like manageable 25-minute intervals. Um, the idea is that it reduces overwhelm by giving you clear start and stop points, minimizing decision fatigue, and providing built-in breaks. So you want to use physical timers to externalize the time management. You might want to start with shorter intervals, like 15 minutes if you need to. You can combine it with body doubling to add some more accountability, and you can track completed Pomodoros to build motivation. So you'd be working for 25 minutes, let's say, and then you'd take a 5 to 10-minute break, and then you'd complete like 4 of these intervals. And once you've done that, you can take a longer break of like 15 to 30 minutes. So depending on the severity of, the executive function issues, those lifestyle or behavioral interventions might not be enough, or maybe it would just help to have additional kind of accountability in that check-in. So there are some evidence-based professional interventions that can help address these deficits. Often they're more effective when they're combined with all of those strategies I've already mentioned. And it's important to kind of individualize the plan depending on, the needs of the person. So finding that right combo sometimes requires a lot of patience and working with healthcare providers. Regular reassessment and adjustment of treatment plans is usually necessary to get the best results. So the kinds of interventions we're talking about are like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is an approach that helps identify and alter negative thought patterns and maladaptive behaviors and develop more effective coping strategies. And then medication. So especially with adults with ADHD, medication can really improve executive functions. Stimulants can enhance concentration, impulse control, and task completion abilities as part of a comprehensive plan. And then there's also professional coaching. There are ADHD coaches or executive function coaches out there that can also help. I'm not as familiar with that. So if that's something that you're interested in, I recommend doing some research on it. So with the cognitive behavioral therapy, that's a treatment that focuses on helping identify faulty cognitions and cognitive distortions. It has the most evidence of any therapeutic technique in successfully improving executive function impairment, particularly with ADHD. Studies have found that CBT is effective in treating symptoms both in the short and long term for individuals with ADHD in particular. And with CBT, it's believed that a person's dysfunctional thinking about an event and the consequent behavior in response to that thinking has more of an impact on the well-being of the person than the actual event itself. So CBT focuses on changing these negative thoughts or attitudes to more positive, healthy ones. And also it can provide some practical strategies, kind of like the ones we've talked about, providing techniques for organizing tasks, managing time, improving self-regulation. And then with medication, That's usually the first line or primary treatment for disorders involving executive dysfunction, like ADHD. So stimulants and antidepressants are the most commonly prescribed medications for these issues. Medications, particularly stimulant medications, may improve executive function performance, particularly when the person has ADHD. When a person's taking stimulant medication, there's a biological change in how the brain takes in information and processes and stores it. The stimulant medications, there's often a lot of concerns that people will have regarding that. Stimulant meds have actually been available by prescription in the US since 1937. Studies haven't found any evidence of permanent brain rewiring or stunted height or malnutrition associated with the use of stimulant medication, with the exception of the person already having an already existing cardiac issue. But heart issues have also not been found to be an issue with stimulant medications. Studies have also found that stimulant medications have either no effect or even reduce an individual's chances of addiction, and have been found to decrease the chances of relapse in recovering addicts, especially if ADHD is one of the issues. Antidepressants and other non-stimulant medications may also be prescribed, especially in cases of depression, anxiety. So I feel like that was a lot. So the key takeaways are that, executive function deficits can present significant challenges for adults, particularly those with ADHD. But these difficulties can show up in various aspects of life, from professional performance to personal relationships. However, research has shown or suggested that executive functions can be improved through consistent practice and appropriate interventions. And if anything, it can be managed. A multifaceted approach combining structured routines, task management techniques, mindfulness practices, regular exercise, proper nutrition, adequate sleep, and appropriate professional support offers the best chance for improving executive functioning. The most encouraging bit is that those executive functions are malleable through adulthood. By implementing evidence-based strategies consistently, adults with executive function challenges can experience significant improvements in their daily functioning, productivity, relationships, and overall quality of life. So that is that. And then here's some references if you want to do any further reading. So yeah.
Thank you, Devin. If anyone has any questions, they can hop on and unmute themselves or put it in the chat. That's totally up to you. But I will take that slide and put for the references and make sure that that is available on YouTube. So if you want to just click it and go, then you'll be able to do that in the notes from YouTube if you want to have that further reading. The really great news is that even with all that information, that is why we are here. So if that sounds like a lot and you're like, I have no idea where to start, a great place to start would just be by calling. I usually do intake for anyone that might be interested in speaking further about some of these exact things, and just getting with a professional and being able to sit down and go over your particular day-to-day life and how we might be able to come alongside you and improve that. So unless anyone has any questions, I will close here, and this will be available probably the next couple of days on our YouTube as well as social media. I think, Devin, you will need to hit the stop record button since you're the host.
Where's the stop record button? Okay, found it.